The conclave hall floated in the darkness of space, like a diamond carved from starlight. Inside, thousands of beings from across the galaxy filled the enormous seats that rose in circles toward the ceiling. They had come to witness a challenge, a battle that would decide the fate of an entire species. Queen Selivara stood alone in the center of the great arena. Her body was covered in a shell that looked like purple crystal, but today it seemed dull and tired. She had been standing there for almost 3 days, fighting a battle that existed only in light and mathematics. Above her head, huge holographic images showed fleets of ships moving through space, attacking and defending in a war that was not real, but would have very real consequences. The Queen was losing. Her opponent sat across the arena in a chair that looked more like a machine than furniture. The Vredak champion was connected to computers by cables that ran into his skull. His species did not have names like humans did. He was simply called Champion 7 Apex. His face showed no emotion as his fleet of holographic ships destroyed the Queen's forces one by one. The challenge had been called because the Vredak Collective wanted the Kirathi breeding grounds. These were not just planets to the Kirathi people. They were sacred places where their ancestors had been born for millions of years. The grounds contained caves of singing crystal, where Kirathi eggs were laid and where young ones learned their first songs. To lose these places would mean scattering the Kirathi across the galaxy as refugees, their culture broken and forgotten. But the Conclave did not allow wars between member species. Instead, disputes were settled through challenges like this one. 2 champions would fight using holographic fleets in simulated battles. The winner would claim the disputed territory. It was supposed to be more civilized than actual war, but to those who lost, the pain was just as real. Dr. Marcus Webb sat in the observer section reserved for humans. His people were new to the galaxy, having built their first faster-than-light ship only 18 years ago. The other species barely noticed humans. Earth's delegation was small and seated in a corner where no one important had to look at them. Marcus was a military historian. He had spent his entire adult life studying how humans fought wars throughout history. He had thought coming to the Conclave would be exciting, a chance to see how other species approached conflict. Instead, he was watching something that made his stomach turn with frustration. The holographic battle above showed the Queen's last strong position collapsing. She had tried something clever, splitting her fleet to attack from 2 sides at once. For a moment, it looked like it might work. Then, the Vredak champion's response came like lightning. His ships moved in patterns so perfect, they looked like a dance. Every ship was exactly where it needed to be. Every shot was calculated to do maximum damage. Every defense was positioned to stop the Queen's attack completely. The Queen's formation fell apart. Her holographic ships exploded in silent bursts of light. The beings in the audience made various sounds of disappointment or satisfaction, depending on which side they supported. Marcus leaned forward in his seat. His colleague, Dr. Sarah Chen, touched his arm. "You haven't slept in 2 days," she said quietly. "This isn't our problem, Marcus. We're just here to observe." "I am observing," Marcus said, not taking his eyes off the battle. "And what I'm observing is wrong." "Wrong how?" "The Vredak fight like machines, because they are machines. Look at those movement patterns. Every decision is made by quantum computers. They calculate every possible move the Queen could make and prepare the perfect counter before she even finishes thinking her strategy." "That's why they're winning," Sarah said. "You can't beat perfect mathematics." "Maybe," Marcus said, but something bothered him, an itch at the back of his mind that he could not quite scratch. Down in the arena, the Queen's advisors were speaking to her in low, musical voices. The Kirathi language sounded like wind chimes in a gentle breeze. Marcus had learned enough of it to understand that they were telling her to surrender. Better to concede with dignity than to have every last ship destroyed. Better to save some pride. The Queen's crystalline shell flickered with colors that Marcus had learned meant sadness and determination. She refused to give up. Her people were watching. She would fight until the very end, even knowing that the end was coming soon. The holographic battle continued. The Queen tried different tactics. She tried aggressive rushes and careful defensive formations. She tried dividing her fleet and keeping it together. She tried targeting the enemy's weak points and going straight for their command ships. Nothing worked. Every time she made a choice, the Vredak champion had already predicted it and prepared the counter. It was like watching someone try to surprise their own reflection in a mirror. Marcus pulled out his portable computer and started reviewing the battle patterns. He went back through recordings of the previous 3 days, watching how the Vredak champion responded to different attacks. Sarah was right that the Vredak fought with perfect efficiency, but she was also wrong about something important. Perfect efficiency followed patterns. Patterns could be understood. And if something could be understood, it could be beaten. The problem was that every species in this galaxy had evolved their military thinking the same way. They optimized for survival. They calculated risks. They eliminated waste. They fought logically, because logic won wars when both sides fought the same way. But humans had learned to fight differently. Human history was full of battles won by people who made terrible decisions that somehow worked, full of desperate gambles and crazy risks, full of leaders who broke every rule and won anyway. Human warfare was not just about mathematics. It was about psychology, chaos, and the willingness to try things that should not work. Marcus looked up at the holographic battle just as the Queen launched what appeared to be her final attack. It was a good strategy, a brilliant use of her remaining ships. The Vredak champion's response destroyed it in 40 seconds. The audience began to murmur. The end was here. The Karathi delegation sat in heartbroken silence. Their queen had fought with honor, but honor was not enough against quantum computers. That was when Marcus Webb stood up. His movement was so sudden that Sarah jumped in her seat. Other humans in their delegation turned to look at him in confusion. What was he doing? Marcus's voice rang out across the vast chamber. I invoke the right of counsel under Conclave Law, Article 47, Subsection 9. The entire arena went silent. Thousands of alien eyes turned toward the small human standing in the cheap seats. The silence in the conclave hall was so complete that Marcus could hear his own heartbeat pounding in his ears. He remained standing while thousands of beings from hundreds of worlds stared at him with confusion and curiosity. Some had eyes like humans. Others had sensors that glowed in the darkness. A few had no visible sense organs at all, but somehow he knew they were all focused on him. The head arbiter of the conclave was a being named Thal Carex. His species looked like walking trees made of silver metal. His voice boomed across the arena like thunder. State your credentials and intention, observer from Earth. Marcus's throat was dry, but he forced himself to speak clearly. My name is Dr. Marcus Webb. I am a military historian from Earth. I invoke the ancient right that allows any observer to offer counsel to a challenged party, if that party accepts the offer. The arbiter's metal branches rustled, creating a sound like wind through leaves. The right of counsel has not been invoked in 3,000 cycles. Your species has been part of the conclave for less than 20 cycles. You have no standing in this matter. The law does not require standing, Marcus said. He had spent the previous night reading every conclave regulation he could find, preparing for a moment he had not really expected to come. It only requires that I am present as a registered observer and that the challenged party accepts my counsel. Down in the arena, Queen Selivara turned to look at Marcus. Even from this distance, he could see the colors shifting across her crystalline shell. He did not know what the colors meant, but her advisors were speaking urgently to her in their musical language. They seemed to be telling her not to accept help from this strange little creature from an unknown world. The Vredak champion disconnected one of the cables from his head and spoke for the first time. His voice was flat and emotionless. This is an insult to the Conclave. Humans are primitives. Their military history consists of throwing rocks at each other with increasing complexity. They have no understanding of advanced warfare. Marcus felt anger flash through him, but kept his voice steady. Our lack of understanding is exactly why I might help. Sometimes not knowing the right way to do something means you find a new way. The Arbiter raised one branch for silence. The decision belongs to Queen Selivara. Does she accept or reject this counsel? The Queen stood tall despite her exhaustion. Her advisors were still speaking urgently, their voices rising in pitch. They clearly thought this was a bad idea. How could a human possibly help when the greatest military minds of the Karathi Empire had already tried everything? But the Queen had nothing left to lose. Her people were about to lose their sacred breeding grounds. Their culture would be scattered. Their songs would be forgotten. She had already tried every strategy she knew. She had already accepted that she would lose. What harm could come from trying something new, even if it came from an unlikely source? The colors on her shell shifted to a pattern that Marcus somehow understood meant determination mixed with hope. "I accept the human's counsel," she said in a voice that rang like crystal bells. The arena erupted in noise. Beings shouted objections in 100 different languages. The Vredak delegation was particularly loud, insisting this violated the spirit of the challenge, even if it followed the letter of the law. But the Arbiter's voice cut through the chaos like a blade. The law is clear. The challenged party has accepted counsel. Dr. Marcus Webb of Earth may approach the arena. Marcus's legs felt weak as he walked down the long stairs toward the arena floor. Sarah grabbed his arm as he passed. "Marcus, what are you doing? You can't fight against quantum computers. You're going to humiliate yourself and all of humanity." "Maybe," Marcus said, "but I have to try." The walk to the arena felt like it took hours, even though it was only a few minutes. Marcus could feel all those alien eyes watching him. He could hear the whispers and the sounds of doubt. When he finally reached the arena floor, guards directed him to stand beside the Queen. Up close, she was even more impressive. She stood 3 meters tall, her crystalline body reflecting the light from the holographic battle above. She looked down at Marcus with eyes that were like purple diamonds. "Why did you offer to help me, human?" she asked. Her voice when speaking human languages was heavily accented, but clear. "My people and yours have never met before today. You owe us nothing." Marcus looked up at the holographic ships, still fighting above them. "Where I come from, we have a saying. All that is necessary for evil to triumph is for good people to do nothing. You're fighting to protect your home and your culture. That seems like something worth standing up for, even if you're not my people." The Queen's colors shifted to something that might have been respect. "You cannot beat the Vredak with honor and courage alone. I have tried. They fight with the precision of mathematics. Every move I make, they have already calculated the counter." "I know," Marcus said. "I've been watching. That's why we're not going to fight them with honor." The Queen tilted her head in confusion. "I do not understand." Marcus smiled, and it was not a nice smile. It was the smile of someone who had studied thousands of years of human warfare and knew all the tricks that civilized species had forgotten. "You've been trying to fight the Vredak the way everyone in this galaxy fights, with logic and optimization. But humans learned a long time ago that war isn't just about mathematics. It's about psychology. It's about making your enemy think you're going to do one thing and then doing something completely different. It's about controlled chaos. Chaos cannot be controlled, one of the Queen's advisors said. That is a contradiction. To you, maybe, Marcus said, but humans have been controlling chaos for millennia. We call it the art of war. And art is never purely logical. The Arbiter's voice boomed across the arena. The challenge will resume in one cycle. Counselor Webb, you may advise Queen Selivara on strategy, but you may not directly control her forces. The Queen must make all final decisions. Marcus nodded and turned back to the Queen. Your Majesty, I need you to trust me. What I'm about to suggest will seem insane. It will go against every instinct you have. Your advisors are going to think I'm leading you to an even worse defeat. But I need you to follow my advice exactly, even when it doesn't make sense. The Queen looked at him for a long moment. Then her colors shifted to the pattern that meant determination. Explain your strategy, human. Marcus pointed up at the holographic battlefield. First, I need you to understand something about the Vredak. They're not unbeatable. They're just predictable in their perfection. They calculate the optimal response to every situation. That's their strength, but it's also their weakness. How can perfection be a weakness? Marcus's smile grew wider. Because perfect responses require predictable attacks. And we're about to become very, very unpredictable. The holographic battlefield came back to life above them. The Queen's remaining ships appeared as blue points of light, while the Vredak forces glowed red. Marcus studied the formation carefully. The Queen had maybe 30% of her original fleet left. The Vredak champion still had over 70% of his forces. By any logical calculation, this was already over. Show me your command interface, Marcus said. The Queen gestured, and a panel of light appeared in the air between them. It was covered in symbols Marcus could not read, but he could see how ships moved when the Queen touched certain areas. He watched her delicate movements for a moment, then shook his head. You move your ships too carefully, he said. Like you're afraid to waste a single vessel. That's good tactics in normal warfare, but it makes you predictable. The Vredak computers can calculate exactly which ships you consider most valuable and which positions you think are most important. Of course I value my ships, the Queen said, sounding confused. Each one represents lives and resources. I understand that. But right now, those ships are just light and mathematics. No one is really dying. So we're going to use that. Marcus pointed to a cluster of her ships on the left side of the formation. Take those 7 ships and send them directly into the enemy's strongest position. The Queen's advisors made sounds of shock. One of them, an older Kirathi, whose shell was pale with age, spoke urgently. That would be suicide. Those ships would be destroyed in moments with no gain whatsoever. Exactly, Marcus said. That's the point. You want us to throw away ships for no purpose? The Queen's color shifted to something that might have been anger or confusion. How does that help? Marcus held up his hand. Please, just trust me. Send those 7 ships on a direct attack at their strongest point. Make it obvious and straightforward. While you're doing that, I need you to pull your main fleet back, away from the most strategically valuable position on the map. Now all of the Queen's advisors were protesting. Even the Queen herself hesitated. You want me to sacrifice ships and give up important territory? This makes no sense. It makes no sense to you or to me, Marcus agreed. But more importantly, it makes no sense to the Vredak computers. They're designed to calculate optimal responses to logical strategies. They'll be trying to figure out what clever plan is hidden in these moves. They'll waste processing power looking for a trap that doesn't exist. The Arbiter's voice rang out. The challenge resumes now. Make your moves. The Queen looked at Marcus for a long moment. Every instinct she had was screaming, that this human was leading her to disaster. But she had already lost. What did she have to lose by trying something different? She touched the light panel and gave the orders. Her 7 ships broke formation and charged directly at the Vredak's main battle line. The audience made sounds of confusion. This was such a basic and foolish tactic that even civilian observers could see it would fail. The Vredak champion's response came quickly. His ships pivoted and destroyed the attacking vessels in exactly 8 seconds. It was efficient and perfect. But Marcus was watching the champion's face. For just a moment, there was a flicker of something. Confusion, maybe, or uncertainty. "Good," Marcus said quietly. "Now pull your main fleet back like I said. Abandon that valuable position." The Queen gave the order, though her colors showed deep uncertainty. Her ships retreated from a strategic location that controlled an important supply line in the simulation. The Vredak forces moved forward to claim it immediately. In the audience, beings were standing up to see better. Some were shouting questions. What was the Queen doing? Had she given up? Was this human actually making things worse? Marcus ignored them all. He was watching the Vredak champions' ships. They had taken the strategic position, but their formation was slightly off, just by a fraction. The computers were starting to struggle with inputs that did not fit their models. "Now," Marcus said, "divide your remaining fleet into 3 groups. Make them uneven. 1 group with 12 ships, 1 with 7, 1 with 4. It doesn't matter which is which." "That is tactically unsound," the old advisor protested. "Forces should be divided evenly or according to their specific missions." "I know what the textbooks say. That's why we're not following them. Your Majesty, please make the division random. Don't think about it, just do it." The Queen was beginning to understand, or at least she thought she was. She divided her fleet in the strange, uneven way Marcus suggested. Then she waited for his next instruction. "Now send the smallest group to attack the position you just gave up," Marcus said. "The other 2 groups, send them toward objectives that don't matter, places that have no strategic value at all." This time the Queen did not hesitate as long. She was starting to see what Marcus was doing, even if she did not fully understand why it worked. She gave the orders. The holographic battle became strange and chaotic. The Queen's ships were moving in ways that violated every principle of military strategy that the galaxy had developed over millions of years. She was attacking where she was weak, retreating from where she was strong, pursuing worthless objectives. And the Vredak champion's perfect formation began to crack. It was subtle at first. His ships took a fraction of a second longer to respond. Their positioning was slightly less optimal. The quantum computers were encountering something they had never faced before. An opponent who was not trying to win efficiently, but was instead trying to be incomprehensible. Marcus watched the enemy's pattern and smiled. They're confused. Their algorithms are trying to find the logic in our illogic. Now hit them with something they really won't expect. Take your largest group and have them fire on your own abandoned ships. What? The Queen and all her advisors spoke at once. You have some ships that are damaged and falling behind, right? Ships you were going to lose anyway? Target them yourselves. Destroy them before the enemy can. That is madness, the old advisor said. We would be doing the enemy's work for them. Marcus shook his head. We would be breaking the pattern again. Every species fights to preserve their forces as long as possible. By destroying our own damaged ships, we remove variables from the Vredak's calculations. But more than that, we make them question everything. If we're willing to destroy our own ships, what else might we be willing to do? The Queen's colors flickered rapidly, cycling through patterns Marcus could not name. Then she laughed. It was a sound like crystal bells breaking, and it filled the arena. She understood now. This human was not teaching her to fight better. He was teaching her to fight differently. She gave the order. Her ships opened fire on her own damaged vessels, destroying them in flashes of light. The audience gasped. The Vredak delegation stood up, shouting objections. This had to be against the rules somehow. But the Arbiter checked the regulations and found nothing forbidding it. In his chair, the Vredak champion disconnected more cables from his head and connected new ones. He was adding more computing power to his systems, trying to process what was happening. His perfect face showed emotion for the first time. Frustration. Now, Marcus said, his voice intense, we're going to do something really crazy. I need you to send a message to the Vredak champion. Tell him you want to negotiate a ceasefire. In the middle of a battle? The Queen stared at him. That is not allowed. Check the rules, Marcus said. I already did. Communication between combatants is not forbidden. It's just never done, because it's considered dishonorable. The Queen was silent for a moment. Then her colors shifted to something that looked like dark amusement. You are teaching me to fight without honor. No, Marcus said firmly. I'm teaching you to fight to win. Honor is important, but survival is more important. You can be honorable after you save your people's breeding grounds. The Queen sent the message. The Vredak champion received it, and for a full 3 seconds, his ships did not move at all. His computers were completely overwhelmed, trying to calculate why an enemy on the verge of defeat would ask for negotiation. Was it a trick? A distraction? Some clever plan? It was none of those things. It was just chaos. Beautiful, unpredictable, human chaos. The Vredak champion did not respond to the Queen's message about a ceasefire. But those 3 seconds of hesitation were enough. While his computers tried to process the unexpected communication, the Queen's scattered forces moved into new positions. Not better positions necessarily, but different ones. Unexpected ones. Marcus could see the Vredak ships struggling to adapt. Their movements became slightly jerky, less smooth. The quantum computers were running multiple scenarios simultaneously, trying to predict what the Queen would do next. But how could they predict someone who had stopped trying to make sense? They're off balance, Marcus said. Now we push harder. I need you to understand something about human warfare, Your Majesty. We developed most of our tactics fighting against other humans. And humans are very good at lying, bluffing, and misdirection. What is bluffing? The Queen asked, her attention split between Marcus and the holographic battlefield. It means making your enemy think you have something you don't have, or that you're planning something you're not planning. Like in a card game, pretending you have good cards when you actually have bad ones. Marcus pointed to her remaining ships. Take your weakest group and have them form up like they're preparing for a massive attack. Make it look important. Add all the energy signatures and communication traffic you would use for a real assault. Then don't attack. Just sit there. The Queen's colors showed amusement now, mixed with something like excitement. She was beginning to enjoy this strange way of fighting. She ordered her ships to form an attack pattern, complete with all the preparations for a major offensive. Energy readings spiked. Ships locked weapons. Everything suggested an imminent assault. The Vredak champion took the bait. He redirected a significant portion of his fleet to defend against the expected attack. His ships moved into perfect defensive positions, ready to counter the Queen's assault with overwhelming force. The attack never came. The Queen's ships just sat there, doing nothing. Now hit them from the other side with your real attack, Marcus said. Not where they're defending, but where they left weak because they moved to defend the fake attack. The Queen struck. Her main force, the group that had been seemingly doing nothing important, suddenly surged forward. They hit the Vredak's weakened flank with everything they had. For the first time in 3 days, the Queen's ships broke through the enemy formation. Several Vredak vessels were destroyed before the champion could redirect his forces. The arena erupted in noise. Others shouted in confusion. The Kirathi delegation was on their feet, their crystalline bodies ringing with excitement. They had not seen their queen land a successful blow in days. But Marcus was not celebrating yet. Don't get confident. That worked once. It won't work the same way twice. The computers are learning. We need to keep changing. What do humans do when the enemy learns their tricks? The Queen asked. Marcus grinned. We use different tricks. In my planet's history, there was a general named Hannibal. He fought against an empire that had more soldiers and better resources. So he used surprise and deception. He once put torches on the horns of cattle and drove them at the enemy at night. The enemy thought it was a massive army attacking and panicked. You want me to use cattle? The Queen sounded genuinely confused. No, I want you to understand the principle. Make the enemy see what they expect to see, or make them see something completely different from reality. In space warfare, that means controlling their information. Your ships have sensors, right? Ways to detect other ships? Of course. Can you make false sensor readings? Make it look like you have ships where you don't? The Queen consulted with her advisors. The old one spoke up. Yes, we can create sensor ghosts. But this is considered deceptive and dishonorable in warfare. But not illegal? Marcus asked. The advisor reluctantly shook his head. Not illegal in the challenge rules, no. Just not done. Then we're doing it, Marcus said. Create ghost images of your ships. Make the Vredak think you have more forces than you do. Spread them across the battlefield. The Queen gave the order, and suddenly the holographic display filled with her ships. But most of them were not real. They were sensor illusions, false readings meant to confuse and mislead. The Vredak champion's response was immediate. His ships began firing on the ghosts, wasting ammunition and energy on targets that did not exist. When they realized the deception, they had to recalculate everything. Which ships were real? Which were fake? The computers can figure it out eventually, but it took time. And time was something the Queen could now use. Marcus was pacing now, his mind racing through centuries of human military history. Here's another concept, the feint. You make a move that looks real, force the enemy to respond, then reveal it was just a distraction. But the key is that it has to be believable. You have to commit enough resources that the enemy takes it seriously. The Queen was learning quickly. She sent a medium-sized force toward one of the Vredak's key positions. They attacked with genuine intensity, making the champion think this was a serious attempt to take the location. The Vredak responded by reinforcing that position heavily. Then the Queen pulled her attacking force back suddenly, leaving the Vredak ships defending against nothing. And while they were out of position, she struck elsewhere with her real assault force. The Vredak champion was now visibly frustrated. He disconnected all his cables and stood up from his chair, speaking directly to the Arbiter. This human is corrupting the challenge with dishonorable tactics. These strategies violate the spirit of civilized warfare. The Arbiter's metallic branches rustled. Point to the specific rule being violated. The champion could not. Everything Marcus suggested was technically legal. It was just that no civilized species fought this way anymore. They had evolved past deception and trickery. They fought with honor and logic. But Marcus had studied every dirty trick humans had ever developed. Wars fought with spies and sabotage. Battles won through psychological warfare. Conflicts decided by making the enemy so confused and demoralized that they gave up even when they could have won mathematically. Your Majesty, Marcus said, I need to teach you one more concept. It's the most important one. In human warfare, we call it the Hail Mary, A desperate play with low odds of success, but huge rewards if it works. You try it when you're losing and have nothing left to lose. But we are no longer losing, the Queen said. Her ships now held strategic positions across the battlefield. The Vredak still had more vessels, but the gap was closing. Exactly, Marcus said, which means they won't expect it. The Hail Mary works best when the enemy thinks you should be playing it safe. Find their command ship, the one controlling their entire fleet, and ram it. The Queen's colors flashed in shock. Ram it? You mean crash one of my ships directly into theirs? Yes. In the simulation, that will destroy both ships. But their command ship is more valuable than any single one of yours. And they won't expect you to sacrifice a ship that way because it's inefficient. They'll assume you're bluffing right up until the moment of impact. The Queen stared at the battlefield. This went against every instinct, every lesson she had ever learned about warfare. Ships were precious. Crews were precious. You did not throw them away in suicide attacks. But these were not real ships. This was a simulation, and the fate of her entire species rested on winning this challenge. She identified the Vredak command ship. It was well protected, surrounded by defenders. A normal attack would never reach it. But a single ship, moving at maximum speed, making it look like a reckless charge that would be stopped. The Queen gave the order. One of her ships broke formation and accelerated directly toward the enemy command vessel. The Vredak defenders moved to intercept, but they were positioned to stop a coordinated attack, not a single kamikaze ship. They fired, damaging the Queen's vessel, but it kept coming. The Vredak champion realized what was happening 1 second before impact. His face showed genuine fear. Then the two ships collided in the simulation, and both exploded in a massive burst of light. The Vredak fleet immediately began to falter. Their coordination dropped. Their movements became less precise. The command ship had been coordinating their entire strategy. Without it, they were just individual ships following old orders. And the Queen, who had learned to fight with chaos and unpredictability, pressed her advantage without mercy. The Vredak fleet was in chaos. Without their command ship coordinating their movements, the individual vessels fell back on automated responses. They were still dangerous, still powerful, but they had lost the perfect precision that made them nearly unbeatable. They were fighting like regular ships now, instead of extensions of a quantum computer. The Queen did not waste the opportunity. She struck at their scattered forces with attacks that mixed genuine strategy with random chaos. Sometimes she fought logically. Sometimes she did things that made no sense. The Vredak ships could not predict which would come next, because the Queen herself did not always know until the moment she gave the order. Marcus watched from beside her, his heart pounding. The battle could still go either way. The Vredak still had more ships, more firepower. But numbers were not everything in war. He had learned that from studying every human conflict, from ancient times to the present. Sometimes the smaller force won through superior tactics, better morale, or simple determination. And sometimes they won because they were willing to do things the bigger force would never expect. "They're trying to regroup," Marcus said, pointing to the holographic display. "See how their ships are pulling back toward that central position? They want to reform their perfect formation and fight the way they're comfortable fighting." "Should I stop them?" the Queen asked. "No, let them regroup. It will make them feel safe, like they're getting back in control. Then, when they're confident again, hit them with something that breaks their confidence completely." The Queen's color shifted to something that Marcus was starting to recognize as respect mixed with dark amusement. "You think like a predator, Marcus Webb. You hunt your prey's mind before you hunt their body. Humans are persistence hunters. Our ancestors chased animals for hours until they collapsed from exhaustion. We didn't win by being faster or stronger. We won by being stubborn and creative and willing to try anything. That hasn't changed in 100,000 years. The Vredok ships completed their regrouping. Their formation was not as perfect as before without their command ship, but it was still formidable. The champion had replaced some of his destroyed cables, and was clearly pushing his remaining computational power to its limits. His face was no longer calm and emotionless. Sweat ran down his forehead, and his jaw was clenched with strain. "Now," Marcus said, "give me the craziest attack you can imagine. Something so ridiculous that even I wouldn't think of it. Something that breaks every rule of warfare that exists." The queen was quiet for a moment. Then her colors flashed bright purple, almost glowing. "I have an idea, but it is truly insane." "Do it!" The queen's remaining ships began moving in a pattern that made the entire audience gasp. She was forming them into a shape, a representation of the Kirathi symbol for home. The ships moved into position slowly, deliberately, creating a three-dimensional image in space that had no tactical value whatsoever. It was purely symbolic, purely emotional. And while the Vredok ships tried to calculate what trap this could possibly be hiding, the queen sent every single one of her vessels charging forward at maximum speed in that formation. She was betting everything on one final assault. There was no reserve force, no backup plan, no tactical retreat possible. It was all or nothing. The Vredok champions' computers crashed, not physically, but operationally. They had spent 3 days calculating optimal responses to logical strategies. They had no framework for understanding an enemy who attacked in a symbolic formation for emotional reasons. The quantum processors tried to analyze the pattern and found no mathematical advantage to it. Therefore, it had to be a trick. But what trick? Where was the trap? There was no trap. It was just the queen of the Kirathi, fighting for her home with every last resource she had, in a pattern that honored her people's culture. It was warfare as art, as poetry, as a statement that some things mattered more than optimal efficiency. The two fleets collided in the center of the holographic battlefield. Ships exploded on both sides in brilliant flashes of light. The combat was fierce and close-ranged, the kind of chaotic brawl where computers and calculations mattered less than determination and will. When the light cleared, both sides had lost most of their ships. The queen had 7 vessels remaining. The Vredok champion had 5. But the queen's ships were in better position, and their weapons were charged. The champion's ships were scattered and disorganized. The queen did not hesitate. She gave the final order, and her ships destroyed the remaining Vredok vessels one by one. When the last enemy ship exploded, the holographic battlefield went dark. The simulation was over. For a moment, the entire conclave hall was silent. Then the arbiter's voice rang out like thunder. "The challenge is complete. Queen Selivara of the Kirathi Empire is victorious. The Vredok claim to the disputed breeding grounds is denied. The territory remains with the Kirathi people." The queen's crystalline body flashed through a rainbow of colors, cycling through every emotion her species could express. Then she threw her head back and sang. The sound was like nothing Marcus had ever heard. A crystal bell mixed with a bird's cry, mixed with pure joy. The other Kirathi in the audience joined her song, their voices harmonizing in ways that made the air itself seem to vibrate. The Vredok delegation stood in shocked silence. Their champion disconnected his cables and walked away without a word, his perfect face showing something that might have been shame or confusion or both. Marcus felt hands on his shoulders. Sarah and the other human observers had come down from the seats and were congratulating him, though some of them looked as shocked as the Vredok. What he had done today would change how the galaxy saw humanity forever. The queen turned to Marcus and bowed low, a gesture that her species reserved for the highest honors. "You saved my people today, Marcus Webb. We will not forget this. The Kirathi owe you a debt that can never be fully repaid." "You don't owe me anything," Marcus said. "You did the fighting. I just gave you some ideas. Ideas that no one else in the galaxy would have conceived, the Queen said. Ideas that won a battle that could not be won. The Conclave will want to understand what happened here today. They will study human warfare now. Some will fear it. Others will want to learn it. She was right. Already Marcus could see delegates from other species approaching, wanting to speak with him. Some looked curious. Others looked worried. A few looked genuinely frightened. The Arbiter approached them both. Dr. Webb, what you demonstrated today was unprecedented. The Conclave Council will need to discuss whether such tactics should be permitted in future challenges. They're permitted now, Marcus said firmly. We broke no rules, we just fought differently. Yes, and that difference may change warfare across the galaxy. The Arbiter's branches rustled in a way that might have been concern or respect. Your species has been starfaring for less than 20 cycles, yet you have knowledge we have forgotten or never learned. Knowledge born from conflict and struggle. Marcus thought about that. The other species had reached the stars through cooperation and logic. They had evolved past the need for the dirty tricks and desperate gambles that humans had developed. In their billions of years of civilization, they had become efficient and honorable and predictable. But humans had reached the stars despite constantly fighting among themselves. Every war, every conflict, every desperate battle had taught them something new about how to win when winning seemed impossible. That knowledge was written in blood across human history. Humanity would be honored to share what we know, Marcus said carefully. But we would also like to learn from the galaxy's other species. You have knowledge we lack. Perhaps we can teach each other. The Arbiters seemed to consider this. Then he nodded. The Conclave Council will extend an offer to Earth, a permanent seat on our military advisory board. Your species clearly has much to contribute to our understanding of conflict and its resolution. Queen Selivara stepped forward. And the Kirathi Empire offers Earth our friendship and alliance. Any species that would stand up for justice when they had no obligation to do so is a species we wish to know better. Marcus looked around the great chamber. Thousands of beings from hundreds of worlds were watching him, some with hope, some with fear, some with curiosity. Humanity had been largely ignored before today, seen as primitives who barely qualified for conclave membership. That would change now. For better or worse, the galaxy now knew that humans thought differently, that they fought differently, that they were willing to stand up even when the odds were against them. And that when a human stood up, amazing things could happen. Marcus smiled and offered his hand to the Queen. She studied it for a moment, then understood the gesture, and took his hand in her crystalline fingers. The grip was gentle despite her strength. Thank you for trusting me, Marcus said. Thank you for teaching me that there are many ways to fight for what matters, the Queen replied. And thank you for reminding me that sometimes the best strategy is to refuse to accept defeat. As they stood there, human and alien, the conclave hall erupted in discussion and debate that would continue for days. But in that moment, Marcus felt something important had changed, not just in how the galaxy saw humanity, but in how different species might learn from each other. Humans had brought chaos to a galaxy that had forgotten it was possible. And sometimes, just sometimes, a little chaos was exactly what the universe needed.